Hey everybody, John Finn once again with the question and answers. And one of the questions that we get very often after what do you do about kids is very often, what do you do about money? So this one is about what do you do about money in house church. And you've got to understand the difference here. In the auditorium church, a bucket is passed down the rows and all the money goes directly into the church. Trust me, I was an elder and a leader in a mega church of over 10,000 members. I've also pastored a small country church. And it doesn't matter what the size of the church is, roughly 40 to 60% of the income goes to support the building. And the average giving of the church back into its congregation statistically is less than 1% in the auditorium church. Now in house church it's totally different because we follow the pattern of Acts chapter 2 through Acts chapter 5 and 6, where we see the people giving to one another, if you will, horizontally, but also giving, if you will, vertically to leadership. I hate using that because leadership is more flat, but I think it's a context that we can understand, and that's the only reason I use it. So people are free to give between themselves, and they're also free to give to leadership. Those two components are part of Judaism. It's part of, in fact, the word righteousness, tzedakah in the Hebrew, means charity. It means to give, and in that, embodied within that, is that we give to leadership and that we give to one another. And so that's why in Acts chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, you see people who are giving to one another so that there were no needs among them. In fact, the widows who had no family to support them or anything had families suddenly. They had people taking care of them. And they, in exchange, according to 1 Timothy 5, washed the feet of the saints and exhibited hospitality and helped in ministry. So it wasn't just a handout, there was an expectation of service and return that they did in the first church. And so in the New Testament we see this type of giving. You see in Acts chapter 11, the church at Antioch, hearing about the prophesied drought and famine which would hit Judea through the prophet Agabus, receive an offering for Judea, and they send that offering to the saints in Judea. You see Paul in Romans chapter 15 and 1 Corinthians 16 and 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9, receiving offerings from throughout what was modern day Turkey, Galatia, Macedonia, into Greece, modern day Greece, and he's going to give it to the poor in Jerusalem. So what happens in this pattern is that what we see is we give to one another, and then we also give to leadership. That's how I'm supported, is by people affected by the teaching and in our house church network and everything, and they are thoughtful enough to take part of their hard-earned money. And as Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, they give themselves first to God and then also to us, and thereby joining with us in the ministry and the service to the saints. And we value that and cherish that. But how this happens in a practical term is that in house church, we have had house churches who have started checking accounts, and they've had maybe 2 leaders, any checks or any disbursements requiring 2 signatures. We have had house churches who just have a shoebox that they keep in the closet. They take cash and they build it up, and then they'll put it in somebody's account and send money to go dig a well or build a church somewhere or help an orphanage or something like that, and decide on it. The core leaders in a given house church, which, house church is independent, it's autonomous, and the core leaders by consensus can decide what to do with that. But the first priority is to make sure there are no needs in your midst. The biblical pattern is that each house church was responsible for its own. And so, everybody may have a mortgage, a car payment, or whatever the case is, the rent on their house, and those are normal things. This isn't a scheme to get everybody out of debt. This is something that happens when needs occur which are larger than that person could handle, and then the house church steps in and helps them out. And in that sense, house churches have taken care of everything from medical bills to rent to building decks and ramps and repairing engines and replacing tires on cars, where there are needs that are just greater than what can be done locally. And say, wow, like for instance, we've had things like a house fire, and we've had houses damaged by tornadoes and floods. We've had all sorts of things like that. We've had major things, ongoing medical visits on a weekly basis that were larger than the house church could handle itself. Then what we see in Scripture is then they appeal to the network. When the church of Judea was going to suffer a famine and drought, as prophesied by Agabus, they realized that was larger than that local house church could handle. And so they appealed to the network. And so the network, that is, in this case in Acts chapter 17, what happened was the house church from Antioch gave money to help them out in Judea. That's what we do today. Each house church is responsible for taking care of the needs within itself, but when a need is larger than that house church can handle, we appeal to the network. And in that sense, we give away thousands of dollars every year back into the network, a large percentage of our total income, a double-digit percentage of our total income, back into the needs to support those in the network, because there are so many needs that are just larger than the local house church can handle. And so what do you do with money? You need to be organized about it. Not every house church, in fact, most house churches do not use the name Church Without Walls International. They may have their own name. They may want to incorporate or they may not want to incorporate. I don't know. They're just meeting as a house church, and that's not necessary. But there's some form or fashion of handling that. Now, in our network, some people give individually. There's no offering taken. There may be a basket on the table. Each house church handles it in different ways, much like they did in Scripture. Sometimes there's a bank account. Sometimes individuals don't give anything locally in the local house church, except there's a need, but they help support me and Church Without Walls International. There's tremendous freedom there. The main thing you want to do is work out a safe, secure mechanism whereby people can give both locally to needs in the local body and also to leadership. And right now in our network, that's helpful. It's not required. Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 to the Corinthians, he said, look, I worked for 18 months with you guys and you didn't support us, and now it's time for you to support us. And what we find is a natural progression where people receive as they grow and as they go, and they say, you know what, I have been affected by John's teaching, I have been affected by Church Without Walls, I think I'll give to it. And there's no requirement, again, because here's the difference. You see, when you're a captive audience in the auditorium and that bucket is passed beneath your nose, that's like a forced thing. And that's not New Testament giving. Paul told the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians 8, he said, when you give, it's not figured according to what you don't have, but figured according to what you do have. That now at a time of abundance, you can help somebody in need, and a time when you're in need, then they'll help you. Out of 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verses 11 and 12, I believe, if memory serves. And so what happens in house church is it has to come from within a person. There's no pressure from the outside. There's no bucket under the nose. It's just from the inside out, Christ growing in them. Where Paul said in 2 Corinthians 8, he said, you excel in the grace of faith and utterance and your love for us, and you're sharing the gospel. He said, I want you to excel in this grace as well, the grace of giving and receiving. And so giving is part of the Christian culture. To be open to other people of finances and resources and time, it's just part of our culture. But there are lots of ways to handle the money in a local house church, and most of them will have a bank account and usually a couple signatories on there. And then if there is money collected locally, then it's waiting until there's a need in their midst, or they may desire as a congregation, as a house church congregation, to give to someone or to ministry to Church Without Walls or to some other ministry. And individually, people can give to support whomever they wish to give. So there's a lot of freedom there. The key is it's not a bucket under the nose. It is from the inside out to giving. We live to give. It's part of a lifestyle. And you will find that when you are in a lifestyle of house church and you're connected with everyone else, you're living intentionally and purposefully with everyone, in fellowship with everyone around in your house church, you'll find that you're giving. You stop worrying about percentages and you just start giving because the needs are there, because you love the person, you love the Lord, and that's the right heart to give. So I hope that's been helpful. God bless.